As renewable energy sources come online and traditional flexibility is retired, balancing power supply and demand has never been more important, and perhaps never more complex. Industrial flexibility can offer enormous potential to meet our flexibility needs. To explain the significance of bringing industrial flexibility to market, I spoke to Christoph Gardlo, COO and co-founder of ESFORIN. We explore the outlook for intraday markets and how real-time trading is revolutionizing the space. This episode is brought to you in partnership with ESFORIN, the leading digital provider of flexibility marketing in power short-term markets. I'm Pamela Largue, and this is the Energy Transitions Podcast. Christoph, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're talking about flexibility, but more specifically, industrial flexibility and bringing that to market. Can you tell us a little bit more about the significance of the topic, and perhaps in the context of Europe's industrial decarbonisation?
Sure. Well, first of all, hello. I'm very, very happy to be on this podcast today. It's a pleasure. With regards to industrial flexibility, this is basically what we at ESFORIN have been doing for the last 10 years. We've been bringing industrial flexibility to the market with our platform all over Europe. So started in Germany, and we've traded the first industrial demand response flexibility, basically a virtual battery back in the days in early 2016 in Germany. And then we've moved to with our service to Austria, to the Netherlands, and just added Belgium and France as active trading geographies. And basically the challenge or the reasoning for using industrial flexibilities is basically always the same, independent of geographies. It's the main theme is follow the sun. So it's all about really working or finding a way to cope with intermittent renewables and the European-wide new generation profile of the energy market, going away from central controllable fossil generation units and really going to decentral and intermittent renewables. Mainly solar is really a price-setting game changer in the energy market in Europe. And what we do with our industrial customers is, basically we follow the sun, and our industrial flexibilities partner with the renewables in order to provide backup generation in case renewables, especially the sun, doesn't shine as forecasted. And at the same time, we free up a congested grid by not producing in an industrial cogeneration asset at times when the sun is already producing at full capacity, and basically we have electricity for free on the grid. So what we do is, as I said, we follow the sun, we partner with renewables in order to create a green and at the same time reliable energy system on a European scale.
I love how simple you make that sound. You follow the sun and you partner with renewables. But this is a really complex space. When I was preparing for this podcast, going into the details around flexibility and the market and the dynamics of this market, it's really complex. Can you give us a sense of these complexities and the dynamic nature of the market? How quickly are things changing? You mentioned solar being a pricing game changer. How quickly are we seeing the decarbonisation of the energy system and these intermittent renewables coming online? And what impact is that having?
Well, when we founded the company basically 10 years ago, I really remember going to the first industrial prospects back in the days and talking about algorithmic intraday trading in real time. And the customers or prospects back in the days, they basically stared at us and started laughing and said, "Well, guys, what planet are you coming from? It's like aliens." But that really has changed. And I think there were two really massive game-changing moments in the last 10 years. The first one was really the breakout of COVID, and suddenly, market prices collapsed, and basically industrial loads collapsed, and there was room to maneuver. There was suddenly flexibility available in industrial processes that used to run at full capacity beforehand. And I think the second really game-changing moment was the price effect of the Russian-Ukrainian war, and suddenly the industrial consumers and industrial asset operators were really facing significant and severe commercial problems with their energy demand, and were basically looking for every single euro that could be optimized. So over the last 10 years, the landscape and the general setting and the mindset of industrial buyers and industrial asset owners really has turned upside down. And at the same time, I mean, looking at Germany and the energy landscape in Germany, we have a peak grid demand of somewhere between 65 and 70 gigawatts. And by January 25, we have an installed solar generation base of slightly above 100 gigawatts. So basically, that means once the sun really shines, basically midday in June and July, we have more than enough electricity, and the grid is congested, and we don't really know what to do with all that more or less free electricity. And I think the worst case that we can do is curtail free renewable energy. And therefore, we need to find ways to work with that. And you mentioned it already. One way of working with that is to decarbonize industrial consumption. For example, by building e-boilers and basically pushing fossil cogeneration out of the market in times when the sun shines and electricity is available more or less for free. But that mindset has really just only started to become mainstream, and I think we are still in an innovators phase or a very early adopter phase in the market. But I think the best is yet to come.
Christoph, I'd like to delve into some more detail in terms of, you talk about the mindset shift, and it's a fundamental shift that industry is experiencing. And I would assume that the strategies that are having to be employed for the shift to be accommodated, these are new strategies, unique perhaps to the industrial landscape. Tell us a little bit more about that. You mentioned e-boilers and, the different technologies that have to be accounted for or that are being deployed.
Yeah, I think one of the main issues is that today's processes in the industry landscape, they mainly result from management and business school techniques, more or less of the 90s. So just in time and going towards 100% efficiency, that has been the main theme for the last decades. But what we need to admit is that flexibility creates inefficiencies, at least on a local setting. It might be very, very efficient on a systemic point of view, but locally you create buffers because you need flexibility. And any buffer or any moving the asset away from an optimal load and operation point is creating inefficiencies. And that shift in mindset is really the massive game changer. So far, there's been a very, very strong position of asset operators within industrial companies, really going towards, hey, this asset needs to run more or less at full capacity 24/7. But that was okay and really fine in times when we had nuclear power generation or baseload large-scale power plants really flooding the market with the electricity 24/7. But what we see now is 1,000 full load hours of solar pushing into the market. And that means that we need to do something in those 1,000 full load hours. And it at the same time means we need to do something completely different in the other 7,000 hours. Yeah. So I think the main thing that we really need to understand is that flexibilities are hard work, even for the ones for industrial customers who provide flexible assets to the market. But it's worth the effort because it not only creates an economic advantage, you basically earn money with it, but you help to stabilize the grid and you help to really integrate more renewables into the energy system. And that's, at least from my point of view, really, really worth the effort.
Do you think that industries are embracing this? Is there a mindset shift, and are industries starting to see the benefits? You know, you mentioned the economic benefits, for example.
Absolutely. I think 5 years ago, talking about, for example, a paper mill or a paper producing company, it was unthinkable to talk about curtailing the paper machine, the core asset of the process, really stopping to produce the goods and the products that this company is originally there for. And that's what I meant earlier with the mindset shift throughout COVID and the energy price crisis. Today, this is kind of normal. So we have a few paper machines, for example, that we actively optimize on the markets, and that means, and I really can't say this clear enough. It's a massive change in behavior of industrial customers to even think about, I'm stopping to produce my core product because of prices. That's like that has been unthinkable 10 years ago.
Christoph, it is unthinkable, actually, even for me now, trying to wrap my head around this, the shift in mindset. I would like to pivot slightly and focus on intraday markets. Christoph, tell us a little bit about the trends that you're noticing within industrial trading.
Yeah, I think intraday markets have become more or less mainstream. So again, 10 years ago, everyone was talking about day ahead and felt to be the forefront of innovation. And no one basically had heard about the intraday market, especially not about the continuous intraday market. But again, that really has changed. And I think it's due to the sheer amount of renewables participating in the system, and especially the forecast error of renewables. And the continuous intraday market, that's the moment of truth where forecast error meets actual physics. And someone needs to make up for that forecasting error. And the interesting thing in the continuous intraday market is that it's not about megawatts, it's not about capacity like the ancillary services markets. It's really about megawatt hours. And that little h that makes a massive difference. It's really about getting rid of volume in case we have an oversupply of renewables resulting from a forecast error, or really keeping the grid stable and the lights on by providing megawatt hours to the market, because everyone was relying on renewable generation, which simply doesn't come always. And yeah, it's a very, very fast market, and that's completely different to any other electricity market. So the day ahead market is an auction, basically a pay as cleared market. That's fairly easy to participate in. But in the continuous intraday, it's you can imagine it like a stock market maybe. And obviously one and the same quarter hour is like one and the same stock has a totally different value now while we speak versus in 2 hours versus 5 minutes before delivery. But it's always one and the same quarter hour that you trade, or one and the same stock that you buy and sell. The only thing that changes is the value, is the price. And in the continuous intraday, that price changes within milliseconds. And you need to react within milliseconds to those price changes. And best case, you do that without speculation, but with physical assets in the background. So really with a physical hedge. And that's exactly what we do. We do asset-backed trading in ultra high speed as a service. That's the continuous intraday.
Christoph, it's a little bit mind-bending for someone like me who doesn't have experience in this. So I appreciate you explaining that to me and to our listeners. And I think what I'm trying to imagine is just all of these complexities, the various, we've got intermittent renewables, we've got retiring, flexible generation, the trading in real time. There's a lot of data that needs to be managed. What kind of platform and how do you do this? Explain to me the technicalities. And I realize that this is ESFORIN's wheelhouse, but explain to me how this happens.
Yeah, so we we haven't found any system on the market either that is able to work with that complexity. So that's why we built our own platform, connecting the dots and the bits and pieces. And we believe that, especially for large assets, the real value of that option, flexibility is nothing but an option, of that option really is in individual algorithms. And what we do is we code an individual algorithm for each and every single asset that we trade. And I'm sure you've heard about digital twins before. I think that's really going a bit too far. So we like to talk about a trading twin. So we try to simplify as much as possible, but we need to find, in a discussion with our customers and then translate that into algo code and algo behavior, we need to find that very thin line of what is the asset physically just able to do, and where is the breaking point. When would we overstretch it a bit, and when would the asset not be able to do something? And we really need to find that thin line in order to maximize the trading value of the asset. And then I think reality is a bit more complex than the next sentence, but then we simply translate that into algo code and put that asset on the market individually, and help to keep the lights on and support a stable renewable system.
Christoph, I love that you try to simplify that, but I can only imagine that this is very complex. And perhaps we can have a follow-up discussion down the line and really delve into those complexities a little bit. But I know that you will be going into some more detail at the upcoming event in Amsterdam, which is the European Industrial Energy Days. Tell us a little bit about ESFORIN's participation. What will you be speaking about? And I think, what are the core themes that you're expecting to come out of the event?
Yeah, well, we have industrial roots and an industrial heritage. I mean, ESFORIN stands for Energy Services for Industry. So that's really where we come from. And what I really like about industrial flexibilities is that we mainly, at least at the moment, talk about assets that are already there, that have already been built, and that maybe are not 100% optimized at the moment, but there is a chance, not only for us, but also obviously for the asset owner, for our customer, to make more out of these assets. And I think a lot of the flexibilities in the past have gone to the auxiliary services markets, and that was conceptually basically grab a capacity price and make sure you're not activated. So please don't bother my asset. And that was absolutely fine for the last 10 years. But now we've really reached a state of the energy system with all those renewables that we really need to talk about the megawatt hours, that we really need to talk about shifting volumes into peak generation times of the grid. And that might not necessarily only work with existing assets. Therefore, I think we currently have, I don't know, 5 discussions a day with industrial customers around how to, for example, how to integrate an e-boiler in a so far gas-fired cogeneration asset park in an industrial process. We are really talking a lot about how to electrify industrial processes in order to decarbonize, because I think that's really the main two topics. It's decarbonization of the industry and of the industrial consumption, and it's flexibility provision to the grid. Well, obviously not for the sake of just providing flexibility, but look at Germany, for example. We are just introducing new grid tariff discounts if you behave flexible. And an e-boiler, for example, is a great thing. And in Germany, that can lead to up to 80% discount on the grid fees. And in the Netherlands, for example, the grid is very congested as well. And you already have variable tariffs depending on when you basically have your consumption peak. And you need flexible assets in order to control and steer that, and in order to gain an economic advantage over, well, your number one competitor who, for whatever reason, is in a different country and doesn't have that disadvantage of high grid fees. But I think high grid fees is only one part of the story. The other part is very, very low commodity cost. And it's all about finding the optimum, the trade-off between the two. We'll dive a bit into that in Amsterdam and show real asset insights and live trading insights of what we do with industrial customers already today and then have been doing the last few years, and how to optimize, for example, an e-boiler in a paper mill asset park.
A lot of food for thought there, Christoph. And I think, the way you highlight the different countries within Europe, the different situation, different tariffs, specifically in the Netherlands with the grid congestion, it's really maxed out. So I can imagine that the insights that you would need to share according to each country would be quite different, and the scenarios would be quite different.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, even within one and the same country, you can't really copy paste the approach from one customer to the other. That's why we really think that asset individual algos are the key solution to optimal trading results. It's not only around the grid situation and the price situation on the market, but I mean, in the end, it's physics, and the asset is there to help to produce whatever the customer produces. And there are very, very many physical constraints and restrictions and process side effects that we need to consider before we make a trading decision and before we ramp an asset up or down. And that is a very individual thing and discussion, but we try to simplify it again a bit and talk about the general ideas and topics and maybe best practice insights. I think the key idea is to get started, think about it, and hit the road running and really take it from there.
I think that is why the European Industrial Energy Days event is so exciting, because it really is. It's about action. It's about getting started. And I think there is a consensus in terms of what needs to be done, but just now we need to do it. Christoph, as we come into land, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with our listeners? Anything you'd like to highlight?
Well, I like the approach of really getting into action. And again, that is why we at ESFORIN we focus on the industrial segment. We like to talk about the energy transition and the energy system transition. really from a best practice point of view, today, here and now, what can we do today, tomorrow, and not like in 2030, 2040, or 2050. All that hydrogen is a really nice and fancy thing, but for me personally, way too far in the future. From a character point of view, I really like to get into action, and that's what we do at ESFORIN. The hurdles are really low, and it's very easy to start working with us and to optimize whatever asset you have in your asset park, being an industrial customer. And maybe, by the way, we're not only optimizing industrial loads. That's where we come from. That's what we started with. But we are also one of the largest battery optimizers in Germany. We also optimize renewables, not only the controllable, steerable ones, but we've also showcased that you can extract proper flexibility out of, for example, wind as an intermittent renewable energy source. So we develop ESFORIN towards a one-stop shop for flexibility as a service, as a European platform. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting all of the podcast listeners in person in Amsterdam. We'll be there and up for a coffee chat.
Christoph, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you today and learning about what is quite a complicated topic and certainly a unique topic for this podcast. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Energy Transitions podcast, brought to you by Enlit and Friends. That's a wrap from me, Pamela Largue, and our producer, Kamo Motse. We hope you can join us next time. Visit enlit.world or subscribe for more episodes.